I will hand over the microphone.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this first session of the day. I know that the conference has kind of embedded links to presentations and things. We've also included a QR code to our presentation, both for folks here and people listening at home, if you'd like to follow along. But we have also shared our slides via the kind of official conference channels. The other thing with this piece is we have stuffed so much into this presentation. We consider it to be a resource. We can't get to all the ideas and links and things that we put in here. Please feel free to open it, to click, to play, to search while we're sharing, because this is really sort of us sharing a bunch of cool ideas of things people are doing. And if you want to just start to click and Google and search, you're welcome to do that as we speak.
The photos are also linked. So click on photos because they're probably linked to something, even if you don't see a link. So this is Jessica and Spring, and we are both professors, scholars at Bridgewater State University at Salem College in North Carolina. And we will be sharing a lot of resources and bold ideas, projects, and organizations that are really in our regions. So as you're clicking through and Googling and playing, you might also think, hey, does my town or state do something like that? And that's perfectly fine to go down those rabbit holes, because later in the presentation, we will be sharing a brainstorming exercise that invites you to explore your own community and local options. So we are bringing ideas and initiatives that we're familiar with and participate in. That includes things on our college campuses, in our communities. We are actively involved in a variety of homeschool initiatives and homeschool adjacent initiatives, as well as crafting, making, volunteering, mutual aid work, and more. And I do see the knitting in the front row, and we will get to that.
Our people are here.
So our goals today are to connect open education philosophies into non-academic sharing-centered models and spaces. And that is taking some of the specific ways that we can apply open educational practices and philosophies outside the classroom, off the college campus, in those community spaces with collaborators, right? Not on our own, not in isolation, but in community building and in collaboration.
Yeah, so we figure most people here understand the concept of open education, but it's always good to operationalize things, right? So we are using the open source definition. Open education is a philosophy about the way people should produce, share, and build on knowledge. Everyone in the world should have access to high quality educational experiences and resources. The Open Ed Consortium has this definition. I use a lot in my own work, both on campus and off. Sharing is probably the most basic characteristic of education. Education is sharing knowledge, insights, and information with others upon which new knowledge, skills, ideas, and understanding can be built. So one of the reasons Spring and I decided to do this session is because, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we had this epiphany that we were like, oh, we're like open edding our whole life. Yes, we're both professors and we both have sort of administrative roles and campus leadership roles in which we encourage the use of open educational practices, including open educational resources and open pedagogy. But also we're doing all these things outside. I think that a lot of times as academics or K-12 professionals, I know we have K-12 professionals here as well, we can kind of put open ed in a box. Open ed looks like textbook swapping. Like, that's the goal, is switch the textbook, and that's open education. Or maybe we're doing curricular changes and we're trying to think about an open ed approach to a new minor in our department. Maybe it's about broadening access to digital resources. We know our librarian partners are so crucial to that piece of this world. Or maybe we're collaborating with a bookstore and the registrar. Anyone in here raise their hand? Like, this is a lot of what I do when I'm doing open ed stuff on campus, right? It's all very important work. It's all transformative for our students and our educational communities. But it doesn't always tap into the spirit, the philosophy behind open ed in a broader sense. And so that's what we wanted to share a little bit today in this session. So I'm just going to share a bit about how I kind of came to this model. I call it the spirit of sharing. We wanted to host a campus institute. We were working through a very generous Davis grant that we have at Bridgewater State here in Massachusetts, over in Massachusetts. I forgot I crossed the border. But it wasn't just how to flip a class. You know, we wanted to move beyond like how to change one book in one class. And so I helped lead this initiative, and it was called A Spirit of Sharing Open Education Institute, because I really wanted faculty and librarian attendees to tap into something bigger than how do we change resources that we're using for teaching. And so this is a worksheet. I'd be happy to share information about the Institute. But for the purposes of our presentation, I shared 4 pillars of a spirit of sharing with my faculty and librarian community, really built on that, some of those definitions we just shared, right? So sharing is at the heart of education. Sharing is just and equitable. Sharing is collaborative and community building. And finally, and this was really important because this was one of our early sort of post-COVID offerings, sharing is restorative and renewing. I'm not sure if anyone else here would agree that for me, my work in open education has been healing. It has been invigorating, energizing. I tell people all the time, if nothing else, you want to be part of this community. These are good-hearted, warm, generous, creative people, right? And so this is a framework that I created. It also taps into, you know, you got to have at least one source in these things, right? Katrini 2018 has a really nice piece where they're thinking about sharing cultures versus sharing the sharing economy, right? So the sharing economy is your Uber, it's your Airbnb, right? Zipcar. It's still a very capitalist model of like, oh, we'll share, but still within this like for-profit sector. So Katrini talks about sharing cultures as a contrast. These focus on social networks between diverse stakeholders whose main goal is to co-produce, manage, and share resources, time, services, knowledge, information, based on solidarity and reciprocity rather than economic profit. So this is kind of the lens that informs this work for us and that we share with you as we move forward with some of these ideas. You were going to talk this one?
Yeah, so when we start to think about this, we can begin to see examples all around us. And I'm sure you're familiar with the Little Free Library example of taking a book and sharing a book. But actually, this idea is so inspiring, and it sparks something in people who then go on to take the idea and run with it. So maybe you've seen some of these in your communities where it is Little Free Herb Garden. Take an herb, plant it in your garden. Little Free Sled Library, Little Free Stick Library for the puppies, beach toy libraries, and my people, yarn swaps. There's a whole group up here. There are seeds. There are all kinds of examples where people are just like, I want to share. I'm not asking for anything in return. I want to share, I want to give, and that spirit of equity. What if people who are coming to the beach don't have beach toys? What if we need a little free pantry with foodstuffs that people can just go by and have, right? And it is this feeling of generosity and giving, and it can be really community building, right? That you feel like you're part of something, you're contributing, you get to meet people outside the Little Free Library. And it is a way of bringing whimsy and joy and that renewing feeling that Jessica was just talking about.
That's our hidden agenda. It's whimsy. It's always whimsy. It always comes back to whimsy. Speaking of, right, we won't spend a lot of time here. Again, this is where we're just going to put a lot of stuff on slides. Go check it out right now during lunch. Anyone here familiar with the Portland Sidewalk Joy map? 2 hands up in the back. Okay, we got to connect. So the short version is that a group of kind of artists and makers in Portland have taken this idea and just gone wild with it. And so they've created an entire map of spots in Portland where you can do a sidewalk walk, and they have a little free art gallery. They have fantastical flamingos at one spot. They have this is a dino, like a dino, take a dino, leave a dino shelf, right? And so they're spreading joy, they're having fun with this model. I really want to go there. I take part in what's known as the abandoned art movement. If you're familiar with this movement at all, essentially you make, like literally this gal who got me, first made this put this on my radar. She puts like whole pieces of pottery in the woods with a note that's like, hey, you found free art, right? Please come, you take it if it speaks to you, or leave it or gift it, right? And so you can find abandoned art communities on social media. And the whole thing is to kind of give, and to kind of strew art out in the community. Spring was going to talk about the next one.
Speaking of librarians and how incredibly resourceful and creative they can be, in addition to the sort of take it, maybe bring one back, there are lending libraries for just about anything you can imagine. Libraries of things that you can borrow and use that you may not be able to afford on your own. Or you know what? I'd like to try that musical instrument. I'm not sure I'm ready to invest in buying it yet. I'll borrow it, I'll bring it back. A sewing machine. Maybe I need to make something, but do I need to buy a sewing machine? And who can I borrow it from, right? So I can borrow from a library of things, and tool libraries where you can borrow that tiller, that mower, that large piece of equipment that, does everyone on the block need to buy one, or can we share one, right? And as I said, we're going to bring examples from our regions. I'm sure you've seen in the news about Western Carolina. Western Carolina is actually an absolutely thriving area for community sharing, mutual aid, and these kinds of approaches. One example is the Asheville Tool Library, which is a volunteer-powered member-based nonprofit sharing tools and resources and offering education. So in this case, it's not just borrow the tool. We'll teach you how to use the tool. We'll teach you how to repair the tool. We'll build your skills and your capacity, and then you can volunteer and give back and be part of a community of not just sharing items and objects, but sharing skills and educating each other and empowering each other.
Yeah, another familiar model I'm sure you've heard of are makerspaces, and I hope that you have a makerspace in your community. A really thriving makerspace example is I3 Detroit. If you can kind of see some of the labels over here, it shows you the extent of their space that they share for the purposes of skill building, tool sharing, things like that, from auto to welding to wood shop to jewelry making, electronics and lasers and vinyl and more. I want to live here, but sadly I don't. Makerspaces, an early innovator in these kinds of things. Right here in Rhode Island, there's a creative reuse center that is essentially a thrift store just for craft and art supplies. So they are completely donated. It's like a road trip, right? Right. And so it's, a really focused reused materials, upcycled materials center. But then of course it's bringing in artists, having workshops. Again, we want to kind of make that pivot from it's not just about the stuff, it's about capacity building. How can we in our communities think about serving and building capacity? And this reuse center also has a really strong social justice orientation. It's a huge part of their mission. Up in Maine, they have what's known as an epic skill swap weekend. So the skill swap model, right, where you go, you offer to teach a skill, and then you get to spend the rest of the weekend hanging out and learning skills from other people, every skill imaginable. My sister-in-law is in this picture somewhere, and she has taught everything from like community organizing to acro yoga, herbal tinctures and everything in between.
And in terms of the skill building, capacity building, and empowering, and the anti-capitalist, anti-sharing economy model, there are ways of thinking in terms of what can we make and what knowledge do we need in order to make that? So one example, and we've linked to this, is open source ecology, which was founded by a physics PhD who didn't want to go into academia and began figuring out, how can I build my own farm equipment?
Like you do.
backhoes, tractors, cars, combines, right? That are usually massively expensive, difficult to repair, now extremely computerized, and there are actually, it's not linked here, but you can Google it. There's legislation around what's called the right of repair, because many of these corporations will lock proprietary knowledge. And if you try to repair it yourself, your warranty is voided. So it's also about capacity building in terms of, you know what, maybe we can repair that tractor ourselves. Maybe we can build that tractor ourselves. And in the process, offer a critique of what is intellectual property, what is academic freedom. We can actually bring those philosophies in our academic lives into those community spaces of who owns this knowledge? Why do they own this knowledge? How can we unlock this knowledge? And at that same time, unlock those skills, those hands-on skills, and share those skills.
Yeah, there's another model located in New York. I believe it's New York. I meant to double check. Soulfire Farm, if you're familiar with this model. I have a former student who's been really active with them. Put it on my map. This is an Afro-Indigenous centered community farm and training center. So the goal really is to uproot racism, seed sovereignty in the food system, but especially equip BIPOC farmers and mobilize communities to work toward food sovereignty. So lots of hands-on apprenticeship, come stay at the farm, work on the farm, learn these skills, even if you didn't happen to grow up on a farm, right? So just another kind of thinking beyond the classroom space for an open ed philosophy.
And then back to North Carolina, and out in the mountains near Asheville, there's an organization called Wild Abundance, and they specifically focus on land-based practices. So permaculture, carpentry skills, building, and they specifically focus on women and non-binary folks and bringing people into community. But the reason I want to highlight them as well is that when you have a community that involves itself in a sharing culture, that builds it, that nurtures it, when something like a catastrophic natural disaster happens, that community and that capacity that you've built can actually be mobilized. And it is astonishing to see Wild Abundance and some other organizations in Asheville, the way that they are adapting in this moment. Because what this group has done is they've said, everything we do is shut down except come to us and we will help you repair your tools. If you've been clearing debris and your chainsaw broke, bring it. We'll fix it. We'll teach you how to fix it. If you need to sharpen your tools, if you need anything to do with tools and disaster response, come to us and we're helping. They're involving themselves in mutual aid efforts. And because there's that culture of sharing, it is mobilizing in this moment. And the other example I want to give that is slightly different is a lot of this work does something that we don't see a lot of outside of homeschooling or alternative education spaces, which is that it can be intergenerational in the best possible way. You'll often have older people welcoming in younger people teaching older people, really across generations. There's a new center in Winston-Salem, which is the middle part of the state of North Carolina. This is a partnership between 20-something local organizations, including both of our usually competing with each other hospital systems, a wealth of nonprofits, all in one new building, focused on intergenerational wellness and art. And it is specific in their mission that it is about sharing skills and knowledge across generations. So there's a preschool and there's an adult day center, and they have pottery classes, and I'm teaching knitting classes, right? So it is a space that is intentionally intergenerational about sharing knowledge and skills across those generations.
Yeah, so we each also wanted to share kind of a specific example from our lives. As Spring alluded to in the beginning, we both have connections to homeschooling communities, which in many ways are open education experiments, right? Spring herself was homeschooled and did homeschooling during the pandemic. My husband and I have 4 kids. We've homeschooled all of them, including one who's now in college, right? So one part of our kind of open ed community at that level, we're part of a interest-driven, volunteer-led, inclusion-centered, secular co-op for children K-12. So this is the crew. We took sort of like an official photo, but I thought it'd be better to share their normal, right? And this is one of mine right in the middle. And so in any case, the kids get to, families get to pitch classes based on their own interests or expertise. It's not because they don't have to have a degree in something to teach a class at co-op, right? They pitch based on their interests or even things that they'd like to learn. And then the children get to vote which classes sound fun, and we do it over and over again. So we can see these ways where instructors in alternative schooling models are thinking beyond traditional resources, beyond traditional classrooms, and honestly beyond traditional topics, right? There's some real quirky topics that get pitched, if you can imagine. If you've met any homeschoolers, how we run on the odd side. But for me, it's this really fun way of encouraging this notion of like, what could we learn, and also what could we teach? And we try to empower our older students to also consider teaching classes to the younger ones.
So I am a crafter and a maker, and my love is fiber arts. But an opportunity came up in my town at our maker space, which is called Mixer. So the opportunity was for a metalwork residency. So for the last 6 months and through December, I've been learning welding and blacksmithing and cast iron. We just had a major event that was an iron pour. It was something like 2 tons of metal poured into various molds. But the way that it is set up is the makerspace got a grant specifically to diversify metalwork. And just as an aside, in terms of what it means to intentionally target marginalized or underrepresented people, when this group of women and gender expansive folks, when we started, was when they realized, and they had gone out and gotten the grant specifically to diversify metalwork. And when we got there, none of the equipment fit. None of the gloves fit, none of the coats fit, nothing fit, and all the tables were too high, right? So it actually really is fascinating when you focus on inclusion and equity, because then we had to go out and figure out, okay, how do we actually fix the equipment here? But it has been fascinating, and the model is the makerspace received the grant, we're doing the learning, we're committed to then teaching classes. Right? So it really is about capacity building and sharing, community building, and then passing those skills on. Not just I took a class and I'm hoarding the knowledge to myself, but I'm part of this and I can spread that knowledge to others. And so when we think about equity and capacity building, there are any number of models. Many of the ones that we've shared use work trade, some kind of skill sharing. So you're volunteering and you are then learning as well. Using sliding scale, scholarship programs, community spaces where maybe they are offering a class and people sign up, but then if there's leftover spots in the class, they can be given at a discount or free to students or people who, come at the last minute and say, yes, I'll take that spot. There are ways in which we can think about this as not just no cost, but maybe low cost. So yes, there's cost and maybe it's grant funded. Maybe there's an investment in resources. Maybe there's a small fee. Maybe it is that work trade model where you are giving in order to receive. So it doesn't have to always be no cost, but that it is approached in a way that really focuses on equity and reciprocity. And this is an example from a craft school where they focus on natural dyeing and skill sharing. I think this was you.
Yeah. So part of what Spring and I discussed as we were looking at this presentation and thinking about this, it comes down to what does it mean to be a public intellectual, right? We talk about hoarding knowledge. Are there ways that academics hoard their knowledge and keep them contained to academic spaces? Where can we share knowledge beyond our traditional classrooms or our conferences, right? And not to, replace that, but to add on to the way that we share our knowledge and share our skills. How might faculty and OER practitioners be particularly well suited to create high quality experiences, sharing information literacy skills, sharing their disciplinary knowledge. What unique and unexpected audiences might benefit from the sharing of our knowledge and or skills, and what equity gaps might these relate to? Also thinking about how can we imagine different audiences, again thinking of children, thinking of seniors, thinking of all sorts of groups in between, outside of our typical kind of 18 to 22-year-old average college student, although we know that's a bit of a myth. How can we develop a model of public intellectual service that isn't wholly monetized, as in consulting? So we're not trying to say never have a paid side gig, right? But how might we have a paid side gig and also find spaces and places and causes through which we can share our skills, our knowledge, our passions. And so this is kind of where we wanted to pivot to thinking about alternative models. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. In my area of sort of communication, digital media, there are examples of these sort of hybrid or blended online learning modules that are both have free and no cost badging and sort of credentialing options. And then they have some paid classes, right, where you can also, help support the people who are putting this on. That's just one example of this. But we'd like to have a little bit of brainstorming. I apologize, we created this in Canva, so our fonts are all a little bit off here. But do you want to maybe kind of pass the sheet around? Yeah, we ended up with a bigger audience than we anticipated. So thank you for being here. We're going to share these prompts on our screen as well, especially for those at home. But here's a list of some of the kinds of things we've shared today. Certain models, thinking about resource sharing, skill sharing, things like that. And so we want to invite you to think about, did this spark anything in you today? So I'm just gonna hopefully be able to do this without causing trouble. I need to get the notes in the slides at this point. Can I just escape out of the presenter? Yeah, here we go. Okay. So this worksheet that's going around has these questions, but I'm just gonna grab these out of the presentation as well. And we'll just make a new slide so everyone can kind of see this. So I'm just gonna, oh, I use Canva way too much. It's like, whoa, Google Slides, right? Okay, so I know it is so pretty. So I'll kind of read these questions. Let me read them out loud and then I'll get them up here. So the first part asks on reflection, and you can answer any of these questions. You can think about them. You can write notes. We're going to open up just some time for brainstorming and we're already running out of time. Can you think of a time or place outside of a traditional classroom where you've learned skills through in-person mentoring or apprenticeship, or times where you taught skills? What do you remember about being meaningful about that? Part two, what capacity building or skill sharing could you envision offering as an instructor or a mentor? How might such offerings transform your community? How might this capacity building serve as an equity intervention in your community? And importantly, how might this work be restorative or renewing to you as a potentially burnt out education professional, hypothetically, right? And part three, if you think about some of those ideas, what would it take to make it happen? That's our 10-minute warning, folks. What resources might you need? What might you need to say no to in order to say yes to this kind of community-based work? Who might be a partner to you in this work, right? So this is way more than you can answer right now, but we do want to open up a little bit of time for just some, you can chat with your neighbors, you can work quietly. I'll put these questions up here on a slide, and just take a little time to reflect, and we'll have people share out, did this presentation give you any ideas? And then we'll finish with a couple of kind of less fun, but still important logistical considerations as we do this work. So feel free to work and chat for just, let's say 5 minutes. We've got it all figured out. That was enough time to plan your entire community intervention, right?
Yes.
If you have some energy around this, we feel like our job here, our time here was well spent. I'd love to hear from two people in the room, an idea that maybe came to you thinking about how might you go out into your community and share some of your skills and knowledge. Two people willing to share? Thank you. I want to hear from all of you, of course, but the time.
Thank you. So I'm an open education librarian. I do a lot of workshops and I try to do a lot of targeted stuff towards undergraduate students and I don't get a lot of buy-in. And so I'm thinking right now I have an OER workshop planned for Open Access Week and I'm already thinking I want to pivot and changing that to instead of focusing on OER, focusing on how we have how to promote a culture of sharing on campus because we do have a lot of things you've talked about on my campus. We have a seed sharing library and a maker space. So I'm thinking there's a way for us to really highlight that.
Yeah.
So I'm already reworking my entire presentation in my head.
Sorry in advance for the extra work, but I think it'll be interesting. Maybe one other person. We got a hand up over here from our fiber artists in the front. They're plants. We brought them here to represent our utopia.
Hello, hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Yeah, my name's Haley Norris. I'm from Indiana University. So
We're alums.
we're alums.
Yeah, we're alums.
That's how we met.
so one of the things, so I don't really do a lot of like public service facing stuff. I'm the open ed librarian. I do a lot of facilitation and creation of OER. But one thing that I don't like doing is I'm from an R1 institution and we have to publish. So I actually have this whole project already set up before this of I'm so sorry. Where I'm actually trying to like crowdsource, community source an article about community as a way to teach education, specifically like through open ed, because we do so many revisions and edits, and focusing like my personal position is going to be focusing on trying to transition like the BIPOC community experience into an education platform, but also like farming this out so that way, like, my other friends who identify as different things other than me can have like their perspectives on different parts of community education. So I think like research is also a place that we can like farm this out because I don't know who else also has to publish for things, but
yeah, absolutely. I really appreciate that lens. And we talk about that. That is a unique form of capacity building. And I feel like no one told us in grad school how crucial like co-authorship would be to so much of the promotional and reappointment process, right? As a group of friends, we've been able to support each other in really practical ways. So let me just share a couple, this is not as much fun, right? Some cautionary considerations, right? If you actually do start to create initiatives, groups, mutual aid organizations, you will run into legal, logistical stuff that you do have to think about. Spaces have contract requirements, right? You might need insurance policies or liability waivers. You might need certain tax statuses in order to, receive certain benefits, depending on how you grow and what it looks like. So that's a whole different session. But know that you will run up. We have both literally run up against this like in the last year, and it's like wah wah. It's like oh no. But we're continuing to find ways to keep thinking through this. So we hope that this session has given you some creative energy, thinking about yourself as a scholar, thinking about your life outside of your academic or educational role. We have our inboxes are open and we are here at the conference. We would love if you want to see any additional resources that we referenced but didn't elaborate on, please feel free to contact us with questions, with ideas. We love to collaborate on these sorts of things. So we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for your time today and your participation.
I have a comment in the chat that I just want to share for the folks in the room and for our speakers. So Rachel Beal says, I have a friend in my hometown of Topeka, Kansas, who is a very skilled mechanic, especially working with cars. He has always talked about starting a nonprofit community garage that not only offers free assistance with fixing and taking care of one's own vehicle, but also teaching people how to manage their vehicle for themselves so they don't have to rely on others. He's lucky enough to have many necessary tools. He would just need the space. But this is something that is always really inspiring to me because Topeka is a very poor city. So a program like that would make a huge difference. And he would not only be sharing his skills, but his knowledge with others who need it.
That is fantastic. And I will say, I don't know personally of mechanics for cars models like that, but I know that in Bloomington, Indiana, when we lived there at least, there was this model for bikes, learn bike repair, But yes, exactly. It's a nonprofit. It's people sharing skills, repair your bike, bring your bike in, fix your bike, build your bike, hang out and have community. That's fantastic. And children under the age of 12 get a free bike. It's very much about giving back, but that is amazing. That's what we're after.
Thank you.
Thanks,
for sharing that.
folks.
Yeah, thank you.